Well, hello, welcome back to Talk Today. The time is 8:24. We'll have the papers in just a moment, but here's what else is coming up in the programme.
Before 9, amid a rise in anti-Semitic attacks since the war in Gaza began, we'll speak to a rabbi about how safe his community currently feels. The government's ban on XL bully dogs comes into effect in a couple of days, and we'll be speaking to an owner of the breed about what happens next. And will you be swapping chicken wings for chickpeas during Veganuary next month? I won't be. A plant-based health coach will be with us before 10 for all your tips. Now let's take a look at some of this morning's front pages. The Times reports on a culture of over-promoting in civil service, claiming staff are moved to senior jobs before they're ready in order to get around the Whitehall pay squeeze. And police are giving up on 4 crimes a minute, according to Home Office figures in the Mail. That's equivalent to more than 6,000 per day. The Sun reports on a costly break-in at the home of Man City and England star Jack Grealish, where thieves stole up to £1 million worth of jewellery.
Well, journalist and author Emma Wolfe and the entrepreneur Will Hodson join us now for a look through this morning's papers. Hello again to both of you. Let's start off with the story in The Telegraph. This is reporting what Emily Thornberry said this time yesterday to us about whether she was saying the fact that the budget has been timetabled for March the 6th means that a May election is a dead cert. She described that as the worst kept secret in Parliament. Now, there could be one of two things going on here, Emma. It could be that she really thinks that, and so does the Labour Party, or it could be that they're trying to push the Conservatives into a corner, and then if and when the election isn't called in May, they can say, "What?" You know, they were too wet.
I don't think you should do that in a yellow dress.
Which do you think it is?
I think they're trying. Yeah, I think they're trying to take advantage of their poll lead at the moment. Obviously, you know, Sunak is in a weak position. It's that funny time, isn't it? After Christmas, between Christmas and New Year, we've had all sorts of policies floating around. Yesterday, it was free childcare for all. Brilliant. The day before that, it was scrapping inheritance tax from the other side. So I think there's a lot of silly business going on. We know that Rishi Sunak's been dancing around Downing Street, filming videos of himself home alone and stuff. So something gets to them, doesn't it, between Christmas and New Year? But more seriously, clearly both parties are now getting onto an election footing, aren't they? They're gearing up. Yes, Emily Thornberry yesterday on Talk Today was, you know, trying to nudge them that way. And what I think is interesting is what Ian Duncan Smith, a senior Tory, said about this. He said, I would not go in May. He says, you want the voters to feel things have changed. It would be better to go after the summer break when people are coming back from their holidays and they feel better about life. He wants them to take advantage of the tax breaks, of the cut in national insurance and things like that. So he's saying that actually spring would be a mistake for Sunak.
Will, are you a betting man? If you had to put a flutter on when the election would be, when would you say?
I have strong opinions, but never quite the courage to back them up with my money. But if I were a betting man, I think you're going to see the PM wait for as long as he possibly can, simply because the polls are clear it's not going to go their way. Now, the advice that he's getting, I'm told, is that if he just holds steady, just kind of plots a steady path, he could see something happen to the Labour Party, something blows up on the other side of the aisle, and that could work in his favour. But until that happens, it seems he's staring down the abyss. So I would expect him to wait for as long as he can and probably follow the advice of IDS and wait until the summer.
Yeah. Well, the cost of living crisis, we speak about it a little less these days, but the Mirror are reporting how much the average household is shelling out on essential bills.
And it's a lot, JJ. I mean, it's gone up, just very quickly, it's gone up. We're talking about the key things, the key areas of expenditure, which is water, council tax, insurance, energy. That's gone from, it's gone towards £5,600 a year from about 5,000, right? But this isn't about numbers, let's not get bogged down on this. This is about the kind of country that Britain is. The same paper on the same day, talking about that story, says, we are now 9% poorer than our typical French counterparts in this country. And for the lowest income families in Britain, we are 27% poorer than they are in France. Now, I've always seen France as being a very, very comparable country, but numbers like that are truly sobering. And it flags that this is a country, it's actually two countries. You've got very, very well-off, comfortable pockets, and around them people living really are not a high level at all.
It's really interesting, that French comparison. It reminds me, again, this time yesterday, we were talking, and it was a sort of funny story that was in the papers yesterday, that there was a family in France, 5 siblings who were all about 100 years old. Absolutely extraordinary. One just under, most of them. But the point actually further down the story was saying that the number of centenarians, people who had reached 100 in France, was about double what we have in this country. Now that as a statistic of national, health, that's a really bad one. It shows that the French are much healthier and they're richer. So something's going wrong somewhere.
Yeah. And I think Will's so right to point out that it's things like food and fuel that are really, and we do talk about the cost of living crisis, and we're sick of talking about it, and it's been a couple of years now. But it's those things. When it's £1,000 extra on your bill, if you're wealthy, that doesn't matter. It's astonishing to me how quickly we've got used to the fact that, do you remember about a year ago, food prices just started doubling on really basic staples, on milk, on bread, on cereal, on things like that. And people have just had to. You can't avoid buying your food, paying for your fuel, all of that. And the poorest people have been hit the hardest because they can't absorb, doubling of energy bills or tripling of their food prices or whatever it is.
We're almost at the point where if we acknowledge there are 2 very different standards of living in this country, it's not enough to say, here's the inflation level for the country. If a large proportion of your outgoings is on food, is on energy, is on water, the inflation that you're facing is absolutely gigantic. And going for this one-size-fits-all figure hides the misery that faces a lot of people in 2024.
And actually, if you look at food inflation and really dissect those numbers, the basics, which are the things in the supermarket which people on lower incomes are buying, the food inflation of the basics is higher than the food inflation on your lobsters and caviar. Do you know what I mean? So actually, even that statistic doesn't tell the full story. You need to look at the basics.
But then again, in France, they very quickly froze the prices on the basics.
I know, and why can't we intervene in some way? I know that's not a popular thing to say, but it can't be acceptable that people have to go to the supermarket and spend double on the basics of life. It's not discretionary like caviar and although that's not discretionary for me.
Speaking as an entrepreneur, I have to say we have to have some faith that the fundamentals of a free market can actually get the right result to the people. Now, we can laugh at that, so maybe that's an opinion that's 20 years out of date. But fundamentally, I think that's correct. The problem with energy bills is not the government repaying half, which is what happened. The wholesale prices went so far out of control, the only way to make them affordable was for the government to pay half of it. And by the way, that's on our tab as taxpayers. We have to pay that back at some point. What you're looking for is for a wholesale market, which is properly considered with a long-term plan to make sure the bills we actually face are affordable in the first place, rather than requiring subsidy.
But it doesn't help the poorest families right now.
No. And also, I think we would probably all like to believe that the market will be the correct place for these things to be flashed out. But actually, the retail market in food is a strange market. It's not a sort of proper, perfect form of a market. You've got the supermarkets that have a huge amount of power compared to other players in the market. So markets don't always perform as an economist would like them to perform.
And to your point about health and about diet, if they're performing well, and let's say they're getting food which is flying off the shelves, and British families saying, well, I can afford that, the things that are cheap on the buy one, get one free is quite possibly the stuff that ensures most British pensioners are going to get nowhere near ripe old age of 100 as they do in France.
Well, exactly, and the health...
The children will be obese and go on and be...
Yeah. Well, Emma, speaking of health, the Times...
Another really depressing story.
Yeah, that's why I gave it to you.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, long-term illness apparently amongst young people aged 16 to 24 has doubled since 2010. Now, this is analysis by the Labour Party, so that's a little caveat. But I think the point still stands. It's gone from around 100 and something thousand to around 235,000 young people, economically inactive, not seeking work because of long-term illness.
And what are we talking about when we're talking about long-term illness? Most of us would assume there'd be a mental health element.
Issues are the primary thing. We've got a real problem in this country. I think as well as mental health issues, which are cited, it's also a thing about lack of direction, a lack of kind of motivation, a feeling that they have a role, a functioning role in our society, or that perhaps at school and college that they're not given a sense of wanting to do something or the correct training. There are lots of different issues. And the benefit system as well.
I'm certain that a number of people watching will be thinking to themselves, In my day, you just got on with it.
yeah.
You know, you didn't go to your doctor and say, sign me off work because I'm feeling a little bit blue. Is that unfair?
I think it's unfair. I don't think it works for anyone, right? Family is an intergenerational time. You know, we're spending time with, you know, parents, if we're lucky, grandparents as well. And I have to say, I am really saddened by this judgment that comes from older generations to the young, and frankly, from young generations to the old. When we went through the pandemic, what we saw was a huge sacrifice across the board, very largely from the young, towards the old, who are going to suffer most of the pandemic. Now, the young are facing not just stories like this, but the economy they have is challenging. It's very, very difficult to get on the housing, on the property market, on the property ladder. And these weren't quite challenges that faced older people. Also, you know, tuition fees, stuff like this. So I think we have to look with a certain amount of sympathy about the future that awaits people who are 16 to 24.
Are we perhaps mollycoddling them a little too much, making too many excuses for them?
That is entirely possible. That's entirely possible. The problems that they face in terms of property market out of control, out of reach, they're worried about climate change, they're worried about the rise of pandemics, etc. Those are real problems. Is the solution for them to be mollycoddled? I don't think so. But that doesn't mean they haven't got a real challenge in front of them.
But also, the most depressing thing in the world is not doing anything, is not having a job, is not having a purpose. Things like, which everybody's faced forever, things like anxiety and depression are now seen as reasons to be signed off. They're now classified as mental health conditions. And of course, there are genuine anxiety disorders and all of that. But when you allow people just to say, you know, I'm stepping out of this, I can't cope with the world, then they do become economically inactive. And if you start that at the beginning of your adult life, it's a lifestyle habit.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's go from depressing things to things to cheer us up. This is in the Mail, page 7. Beat Jan Blues without booze.
Yeah, well, January's a pretty awful time, isn't it? This time of, well, late December, early January. They open their article by saying, Christmas is over, the fridge is bare, the nights are still long, credit card bills are looming, and it's cold and stormy. So there we go, really reasons to feel very low. But the favourite things to do to cheer yourself up are snuggling, the top one, snuggling up with a blanket on the sofa, which is quite good.
And cheap.
Yeah, cheap, yeah. Tucking into comfort food, which is good and makes you fat. Putting on your pyjamas when you get home, which I'm a big fan of. The joy of missing out, which I think is great at this time of year, saying no to all the parties, which I haven't actually been invited to, but anyway.
Yes, I love this. Instead of FOMO, fear of missing out, it's all about JOMO, the joy of missing out or saying no. Now, Will, out of these list of things, the best things to cheer you up, which one was your favourite?
Well, I thought that it was just mine exclusively, so I was quite sad to see it on the list. But pulling the curtains at 4 o'clock, I always do. What I can't stand about winter is the dying light, where you feel as if you're holding on to the day and you can't really keep it. When you close the curtains, put on a couple of candles, you start to see out a winter evening on your own terms, and that's what I like to do.
You know, I just learnt this on the other day. My friend says that her mum told her, whenever you're feeling sad, to clasp your hands together and close your eyes, and that feels like the person's holding your hand. I thought, that's lovely. Yeah, I just learned that the other day.
That is sweet.
Yeah.
That is sweet. I completely agree with you about the curtain thing. I hate it when it gets dark outside and you're sort of lighting up the street. Do you know what I mean? Like, and also you feel that if people are walking past your home, they're all going to be looking in. I love that feeling of enclosure and sort of, snuggles. OK, well, I think, have we got time for the accent story?
Yeah, come on.
Good. No, hey,
Reason story.
As the only one with a regional accent, you're going to have to lead on this one, Jane.
Will's going to attempt a northern accent for us.
Come on, Will, what's the story?
Well, the story was, at first, I was absolutely crystal clear that I will not be doing the Lancashire accent in question. But the story is that we could be seeing the end of the Lancashire accent. It's dying out, according to researchers, with young folk less likely to speak with that distinctive...
How does it go? Go on.
Well, I am told the techniques... Obviously, what you're after is the technicalities. And what we're talking about is something called rhoticity, which is really landing an R at the end of a word. I like your her. Over there.
Oh, I like that.
So this is...
From Oklahoma.
I said I couldn't do accents, but I would say this. I think that the diversity of British accents makes up the rich tapestry of British cultural life.
Absolutely.
The fact that between Manchester, Wigan, Liverpool, space for a few miles, there's a hugely different musical twang to the voices.
Yeah.
You go to the States, you could travel hundreds of miles without seeing much of a difference.
That's so true.
So I'm saddened by this.
We're talking about famous Lancastrians, Jane Horrocks, Eric Morecambe, Les Dawson, Jim Bowen. That's
Nicola
the accent.
Thorpe, our
was gonna
regular
say, doesn't-
breakfast presenter, she's from Blackpool, and she has got an accent.
She has got an
Yeah,
accent.
she turns it down a little bit for TV, but yeah, when you
But
hear
I
her,
object
it's
to
down
Will
the
saying
point.
we don't have accents. We have an accent. I have a Londony accent, I suppose.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
So you said JJ's the only one with an accent.
Oh, no,
No,
Daisy-
this is
Daisy
Daisy.
said
This
that.
is
I said,
Daisy.
yeah, I did say the only one with a regional accent.
Regional, yeah.
I'd say the only one that you could pinpoint
Yeah.
to a
Well,
region.
look, I'm a yam, but even when I speak like this, that's how we speak in Dudley. I can't speak like
Dudley.
that all the time.
Love
Obviously,
it.
people understand what I'm saying. But yeah, I'm a Dudley
I
yam
love
yam.
it. I completely agree, though. We need to hold on to our regional accents. And actually, it is good. You know, back in our parents' day, you wouldn't hear regional accents on the telly. It was all, received pronunciation.
Yes.
And people feeling that they had to change their accents
Yeah.
to get on in life.
And the question is, how do you encourage the survival of these accents? Because it's one thing to have the representation of beautiful regional accents on
Thank you,
television,
Bab.
which I applaud.
Ta.
But I'd imagine that most people in Wigan or Dudley are probably more likely to be watching television made in America or made with a universal global American accent.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, if you weigh those two things up, I wonder if it doesn't come down on the side of a homogenisation of accents towards an American.
And actually, one of the things that came out during the pandemic, when a lot of preschool kids hadn't socialised with other kids and family members, they had basically socialised with an iPad and with American TV. A lot of teachers were saying they were arriving at school with American accents because that's where they had got their
Terrible.
socialisation from.
really
Brummy
so
iPads.
it
Brummy
can
iPads.
Yeah, exactly. Well, chaps, Emma and Will, thank you very much.
Super.